It was a cool autumn evening, and Judge Monica Hayes, a respected figure in the legal community, was wrapping up another demanding day at the courthouse. Known for her firm but fair demeanor, Monica had built her reputation on ensuring justice was served, no matter the circumstances. Exhausted from hours of deliberations in a high-profile case, she decided to make a quick stop at a convenience store near her home to pick up a few essentials. Clad in a simple gray hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, she looked like any other customer out for a late-night errand. The store, a small corner shop that served the local neighborhood, was quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed softly, casting a sterile glow over the shelves stocked with snacks, drinks, and household items. Monica grabbed a carton of milk, a loaf of bread, and a few snacks for the weekend. As she headed to the counter, she couldn't help but notice a police cruiser parked just outside. Inside the vehicle sat two officers, their eyes scanning the store with hawk-like precision. Officer Todd Miller and Officer Eric Burns had been patrolling the area for years. They prided themselves on being vigilant, often to the point of overstepping boundaries. On this particular night, they were bored, their shift dragging on without incident. When they saw Monica exit the store, their interest peaked. Her casual attire and calm demeanor seemed unremarkable, but to them, she looked out of place in the predominantly white neighborhood. "Looks suspicious," Todd muttered, his hand resting on the steering wheel. "Yeah, let's check it out," Eric replied, already unbuckling his seatbelt. Monica stepped out of the store, the plastic bag in her hand rustling gently in the evening breeze. She was halfway to her car when she heard a sharp voice behind her. "Ma'am, can you stop for a moment?" Monica turned, surprised but composed. The two officers were approaching her, their expressions stern. "Is there a problem, officers?" she asked politely. "Where are you coming from?" Todd asked, his tone accusatory. "The convenience store," Monica replied, gesturing to the building behind her. "Do you live around here?" Eric added, his eyes narrowing as he looked her over. Monica furrowed her brow. "I do. Is there an issue?" Todd folded his arms. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area. Can we see some identification?" Monica sighed, realizing where this was going. She had encountered prejudice before, even as a successful judge. "I wasn't aware buying groceries was considered suspicious," she said calmly, reaching for her wallet. Her composed response seemed to irritate the officers. "Just show us your ID," Eric snapped. Monica handed over her driver's license. Todd examined it briefly before shoving it back into her hands. "What are you doing out here this late?" "I'm on my way home after work," Monica replied, keeping her voice steady. "What kind of work?" Eric asked, his tone laced with skepticism. Monica paused, debating whether to reveal her profession. "I work in the legal field," she said simply. Her answer only seemed to fuel their suspicion. "Legal field, huh? Lawyer or something?" Todd asked, a mocking grin on his face. "Something like that," Monica replied, refusing to rise to the bait. Eric stepped closer, his hand hovering near his holster. "You don't seem very cooperative. Are you hiding something?" Monica's patience began to wear thin. "Officers, I've answered your questions, shown you my ID, and explained why I'm here. Unless you have a valid reason to detain me, I'd like to be on my way." Her firm response seemed to trigger something in Todd. "You don't get to dictate what happens here," he said sharply. "Turn around and place your hands on the hood of the car." "For what reason?" Monica asked, her voice steady but tinged with incredulity. "Resisting an investigation," Eric replied. Monica's heart sank as she realized the situation was spiraling out of control. "This is unnecessary," she said, trying to reason with them. "I haven't done anything wrong." "Last warning," Todd barked. "Hands on the car." Reluctantly, Monica complied, her dignity bruised but her resolve unbroken. The officers frisked her, finding nothing, but that didn't stop them from handcuffing her and placing her in the back of the cruiser. As they drove to the station, Monica sat silently, her mind racing. She had spent her career upholding the law, yet here she was, a victim of its misuse. At the station, the humiliation continued. She was booked, fingerprinted, and placed in a holding cell. The other detainees watched curiously as the well-dressed woman entered, her composure unshaken despite the ordeal. Monica spent the night sitting on the cold bench, reflecting on the irony of the situation. The next morning, her identity was finally confirmed when a junior officer ran her information. "You're a judge?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "Yes," Monica replied simply. The news spread quickly through the station, and the officers who had arrested her were summoned to the captain's office. By the time Monica was released, they were scrambling to explain their actions. Monica left the station with her head held high, determined to ensure justice would be served, not just for herself, but for anyone else who might have suffered at the hands of officers who abused their power. As she stepped into the sunlight, she knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a fight she was determined to win. Monica Hayes didn't waste time after her release. She had built her career on the belief that justice should be blind but never indifferent. Her experience the night before, though humiliating, ignited a fire within her, a personal mission to ensure that accountability extended to those who wore badges. The moment she arrived home, Monica contacted her legal team, a group of sharp, dedicated lawyers who had been by her side for years. They knew her to be a fair and just employer. However, this time the stakes felt personal. Monica recounted every detail of the incident, her voice calm but tinged with frustration. She described the officers' accusatory tone, their dismissive attitude, and the unlawful detention that followed. "This isn't just about me," she concluded. "It's about the countless others who don't have the platform or resources to fight back. We need to take action." Her lead counsel, Anita Marshall, nodded. "Absolutely, Judge Hayes. We'll file a formal complaint and pursue civil action. These officers violated your constitutional rights, and that cannot go unchallenged." The next day, Monica walked into the courthouse, not as the presiding judge, but as a citizen demanding justice. Her presence turned heads. Colleagues and court staff whispered in hushed tones as she approached the clerk's office to file a complaint against officers Todd Miller and Eric Burns. The clerk, visibly surprised, greeted her with a mixture of respect and curiosity. "Judge Hayes, I didn't expect to see you here today." Monica offered a polite smile. "Sometimes, even those of us in the legal system find ourselves seeking justice." She handed over the meticulously prepared documents, detailing the officer's actions and citing multiple constitutional violations, including unlawful search and seizure, false arrest, and abuse of authority. As she left the office, a sense of resolve washed over her. This was just the first step in holding the officers accountable. News of Monica's arrest spread like wildfire. Local journalists picked up the story first, and within hours, national outlets were reporting on the incident. Headlines ranged from "Esteemed Judge Detained in Shocking Police Incident" to "Racial Profiling Allegations Rock Local Police Department." Monica found herself in the spotlight, fielding calls from reporters eager for a statement. She decided to hold a press conference to address the situation. Standing at a podium outside the courthouse, she faced a sea of cameras and microphones. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice steady. "Last night, I experienced an abuse of power by two officers who chose to target me not because of my actions, but because of their preconceived biases. While I have the privilege of being a judge and the resources to seek justice, many others in our community do not. This fight is not just about me. It's about ensuring accountability and restoring trust in our legal system." Her statement struck a chord with the public. Social media erupted with support, and hashtags like #JusticeForMonica and #EndRacialProfiling began trending. Activists and community leaders reached out, offering their solidarity and resources. The police department faced intense scrutiny as the story gained traction. Chief Harold Bennett, a seasoned officer nearing retirement, found himself at the center of the storm. In a hastily organized press conference, he attempted to address the situation. "We take these allegations very seriously," Chief Bennett said, his expression grim. "An internal investigation is underway, and the officers involved have been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. However, his statement did little to quell public outrage. Protests erupted outside the police station, with demonstrators demanding transparency and accountability. Signs bearing slogans like "Justice for Judge Hayes" and "End Police Misconduct" filled the air as chants echoed through the streets. Inside the station, Officers Miller and Burns sat in silence, their confidence shaken. Todd leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed defensively. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "We didn't do anything wrong." Eric, however, looked less certain. "Didn't we? We profiled her. We assumed she didn't belong. And now we're paying the price." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their union representative, who assured them that the union would provide legal support. But even with that assurance, both officers knew their reputations, and possibly their careers, were on the line. Monica's legal team wasted no time filing a civil lawsuit against the department and the officers. The lawsuit sought damages for emotional distress, defamation, and violation of constitutional rights. More importantly, it demanded systemic reforms within the department, including mandatory bias training and the implementation of body cameras for all officers. The legal filing sent shockwaves through the city. The department's attorneys scrambled to prepare their defense, while community leaders praised Monica for taking a stand. During the pre-trial proceedings, Monica's attorneys presented compelling evidence, including witness statements from bystanders at the convenience store and surveillance footage that contradicted the officers' claims. Judge Hayes did nothing to warrant the treatment she received, Anita argued in court. This case is not just about one incident. It's about addressing a culture of bias that allows such incidents to occur. The defense attempted to justify the officers' actions, citing concerns about neighborhood safety and suspicious behavior. However, their arguments fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence. As the case progressed, Monica's fight for justice became a rallying point for broader discussions about police reform. Town hall meetings were held, where community members shared their experiences and proposed solutions. Monica attended many of these meetings, listening intently and offering her insights. "It's not enough to hold these officers accountable," she said during one meeting. "We need to address the root causes: bias, inadequate training, and a lack of accountability that allow these incidents to happen in the first place." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring others to take action. Community organizations began collaborating with local officials to develop proposals for reform, while activists organized workshops to educate residents about their rights. Despite the overwhelming support, the ordeal took a toll on Monica. She found solace in her family and close friends, who reminded her of the importance of her fight. Late at night, she often reflected on the irony of her situation. "I've spent my career ensuring justice for others," she told Anita during one of their strategy meetings. "I never imagined I'd have to fight for it myself." Anita smiled gently. "Sometimes the best advocates for change are those who've lived through the struggle. Your voice carries weight, Monica. Don't forget that." Monica nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to see it through. This wasn't just about her. It was about creating a system where everyone, regardless of their background, could expect justice. As the trial date approached, Monica braced herself for the battle ahead. She was no longer just a judge. She was a symbol of resilience and the unwavering pursuit of justice. The courtroom buzzed with energy on the day of the preliminary hearing. Spectators filled the gallery, drawn by the high-profile nature of the case. Reporters with notepads and cameras whispered among themselves, trying to predict the outcome. Activists and community leaders sat side by side with ordinary citizens, eager to witness the proceedings. At the defense table sat officers Todd Miller and Eric Burns, their faces a mixture of nervousness and defiance. Dressed in crisp suits, they appeared far removed from the arrogant demeanor they had displayed during Monica Hayes' arrest. Behind them, their legal counsel whispered furiously, flipping through folders and preparing their strategy. Across the room, Monica sat with her team of attorneys, calm and composed. Her presence was commanding yet understated, a reminder of the professionalism and poise she brought to her role as a judge. The lead attorney for the officers, a seasoned lawyer named Michael Carter, rose first. "Your Honor, the defendants, Officers Miller and Burns, acted in good faith and within the bounds of their duties as law enforcement officers. They were responding to what they believed was suspicious behavior in a high-crime area. This case is nothing more than an unfortunate misunderstanding that has been blown out of proportion." He paused for effect, scanning the room as though daring anyone to challenge him. "We will demonstrate that their actions were justified, and this lawsuit is an overreach." When it was time for Monica's attorney, Anita Marshall, to speak, she approached the jury box with quiet confidence. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen," she began. "Today, you will hear the story of a grave injustice. You will see how two officers abused their authority, acting not on evidence or suspicion, but on biases and assumptions." She gestured toward Monica, who sat silently, her gaze steady. The plaintiff, Judge Monica Hayes, was subjected to humiliation and degradation because of these biases. But this case isn't just about what happened to her. It's about preventing it from happening to anyone else. The opening statements set the tone for what would be an intense and emotional day in court. The prosecution's first witness was the store clerk who had been present during Monica's arrest. A young man named James, he described the scene in detail. "I remember her coming in that night," he said, glancing at Monica with a faint smile of recognition. "She was polite, just buying a few things. Then those officers showed up and started questioning her like she was some kind of criminal." Anita leaned in. "Did Judge Hayes do anything to warrant such treatment?" James shook his head. "Not at all. She was calm, didn't raise her voice. They just assumed the worst about her." The defense attempted to undermine James's testimony, suggesting that his perspective was limited and that he might not have understood the officers' concerns. But James held firm, his recounting unwavering. Next, Monica herself took the stand. The room fell silent as she approached the witness box. Once sworn in, she recounted the events of that night, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I've spent years upholding the law," she began. "I believe in justice, in fairness. But that night, I wasn't treated as a citizen deserving of respect. I was treated as a threat simply because of the way I looked." Anita guided her through the details, ensuring the jury heard every nuance of her experience. When the defense cross-examined, they tried to paint Monica as overly sensitive or even opportunistic. "Judge Hayes," Carter said, his tone bordering on patronizing, "isn't it possible that the officers were simply doing their job, ensuring public safety?" Monica met his gaze without flinching. "Ensuring public safety doesn't mean targeting someone without cause. It doesn't mean violating their rights." Her response left little room for rebuttal, and Carter moved on, visibly frustrated. The prosecution's final piece of evidence was the body cam footage from the officers. Though initially withheld, public outcry had forced the police department to release it. The footage played on a large screen in the courtroom, and all eyes were fixed on it. The video began with Officers Miller and Burns sitting in their patrol car. Their conversation, casual at first, quickly turned revealing. "Look at her," Miller said, nodding toward Monica as she entered the store. "She doesn't belong here." Burns chuckled. "Yeah, probably up to no good. Let's check it out." The video showed them approaching Monica inside the store, their questions aggressive and accusatory. Monica remained calm, her responses measured, even as their tone grew more hostile. The footage ended with them placing her in handcuffs and leading her outside, despite her repeated explanations. Gasps filled the courtroom as the video ended. The officers' biases were on full display, their actions clearly unjustified. Carter tried to spin the footage, claiming it showed the officers acting on reasonable suspicion. But the damage was done. The jury's expressions made it clear they weren't buying the defense's narrative. As the court adjourned for the day, Monica lingered in the empty courtroom, gazing at the judge's bench. She couldn't help but reflect on the irony of her position, fighting for justice in the very system she had dedicated her life to upholding. Anita joined her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're making progress," she said. "The jury saw the truth today." Monica nodded, her determination unwavering. "It's not just about winning this case. It's about making sure no one else has to go through what I did." The stage was set for a final showdown, one that would determine not just the case's outcome, but also the future of accountability and reform within the police department. The courtroom was packed on the day of the verdict. The air was thick with anticipation, and even the slightest rustle of paper or shifting of seats seemed amplified in the tense silence. Reporters scribbled in their notepads, their lenses focused on the expressions of those at the defendant's table. Officers Todd Miller and Eric Burns sat stiffly, their faces pale. Across the room, Monica Hayes sat with her attorney, her face calm but resolute. Today was about more than her. It was about accountability, justice, and change. The judge entered, and everyone rose. After a few procedural statements, the foreperson of the jury stood to deliver the verdict. In the matter of Hayes versus Officers Todd Miller and Eric Burns, we find the defendants guilty. A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom as the judge struck the gavel to regain order. The foreperson continued, detailing the jury's decision to hold the officers accountable for unlawful detention, harassment, and abuse of power. Additionally, the department would face an internal review for systemic failures. Monica closed her eyes briefly, exhaling a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. It wasn't just a personal victory. It was a statement that injustice wouldn't go unnoticed or unchecked. After the verdict, the judge addressed the court. This case is a stark reminder of the importance of accountability in law enforcement. Officers Miller and Burns violated the very principles they swore to uphold. Their actions undermined public trust and caused undue harm. This court sentences them to community service, a formal apology to the plaintiff, and mandatory diversity and sensitivity training. Additionally, they will be placed on suspension pending a full review of their conduct. The officers stood, visibly shaken. Their arrogance had vanished, replaced by shame and regret. They glanced at Monica, but she didn't meet their gaze. She wasn't interested in their excuses or apologies. The system was holding them accountable, and that was enough. In the days that followed, the case became a national story. News outlets debated its implications, and social media platforms buzzed with discussions about systemic racism and police reform. Monica found herself at the center of a movement she had long supported. Invitations poured in for interviews, panel discussions, and community events. She accepted a few, carefully choosing platforms that focused on solutions rather than sensationalism. In one interview, a journalist asked her, "What do you hope will come from this case?" Monica's answer was measured but powerful. "I hope it sparks a conversation about accountability and the way we treat one another. This isn't just about two officers. It's about creating a system that values justice and equity. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with awareness and action." Her words resonated, inspiring rallies, workshops, and initiatives aimed at bridging the gap between law enforcement and the communities they served. Late one evening, Monica sat on her porch, sipping a cup of tea as the city lights twinkled in the distance. She thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. The pain of that night, the humiliation and anger, had been overwhelming. But through perseverance and a commitment to justice, she had turned her experience into something meaningful. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen. It was a message from Anita. "Check the news. They're implementing the first phase of reforms we discussed." Monica smiled. It was a small step, but it was progress. She replied, "Thank you for everything. We're just getting started." She knew the road ahead would be long and challenging. Systemic change required more than a single case. It required sustained effort and unwavering resolve. But Monica was ready to continue the fight, not just as a judge, but as an advocate for fairness and dignity. The case had also brought Monica closer to her community. Strangers stopped her on the street to thank her for her courage. Families shared their own stories of injustice, drawing strength from her example. Churches, schools, and local organizations reached out, inviting her to speak and offering their support. One day, as she attended a community event, a young girl approached her. The child hesitated before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. "Judge Hayes, I want to be like you when I grow up." Monica knelt down, meeting the girl's eyes. "You can be anything you want to be, and if you ever face a challenge, remember this. Stand up for what's right, no matter how hard it seems." The girl nodded, her face lighting up with a smile. Moments like this reminded Monica why the fight for justice was worth every struggle. As months turned into years, Monica's case became a landmark example of accountability and reform. Police departments across the country began implementing changes inspired by the case's lessons, from enhanced training to community outreach programs. While not all progress was swift or smooth, the momentum was undeniable. Monica continued to serve as a judge, her courtroom a place where fairness and empathy reigned. She also became a mentor to aspiring legal professionals, sharing her story and encouraging them to pursue justice with integrity. Looking back, she realized that her ordeal, painful as it had been, had given her a platform to create lasting change. She had turned her pain into power, and in doing so, she had made the world a little better. To those following her journey, Monica often said, "Justice isn't just about laws. It's about people. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Together, we can build a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect." Her words served as a rallying cry, inspiring countless individuals to join the fight for a more just and equitable society. Monica's story reminds us all that change is possible when we stand together. If her journey inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that empower and uplift. Together, we can make a difference.